Okay, welcome everybody to today's AU Core Technical Design Group meeting, consensus group meeting. We've got a number of change requests to go through today, and we'll kick off as we usually do with approval of minutes. And then we're going to do something a bit unusual, in which we're going to talk about one of our change proposals before we do our other usual business and updates. And the reason for that is that Ruben will only be available for the very kind of first bit of the call. So we've tried to shift that around to make sure that he can take us through that content. We've then got some updates, which is also prompted coming out of an action change request. And then we've got a bunch of other change requests. And that's really the purpose of today, is to get through a number of changes that we can apply in our ballot for comment baseline. So I'll skip on past this. And how are we going with people coming in? Are we still, I think that's stable now?
It's getting less and less, yeah.
Okay, that's great. So I'm not sure, let me just double check if Ruben is on the line.
He is.
He is.
Okay, because we can go to yours first, Ruben, and then move into this, but I think it's probably better to let more people come in and go through approval of minutes.
Okay, no worries.
All right, so we've got approval of 3 sets of minutes. These have been emailed out for review. A couple of pieces of feedback have been provided and been incorporated. As far as I know, there's no outstanding feedback. Does anyone need any further time, or can we move to approve those previous minutes? Okay, that seems like we can move to approve those. Can I ask for someone to motion for approval of that set of minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. And can I ask for someone to second that?
I'll second that, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. I'll just launch our poll now. And I'll ask people to go ahead and vote on approval of those 3 minutes. Okay, still looking for people to put through their approval, whether that's affirmative, negative, or abstain. Okay, we've got that coming through now, and I'll just share that. The motion has been approved. Okay, I'll stop sharing, and what we'll do now is go on to our topic on, and I'll hand over to you now, Ruben.
Thanks, Danielle. And yes, thanks to everyone for allowing me to go first. In case you're wondering, I'm in the Philippines at the moment. I'm attending a National Digital Health Convergence workshop as an HL7 International representative. So I appreciate the accommodation to let me go first in this agenda. So we're back to discussing sex assigned at birth, represented as a recorded sex or gender extension. And you may recall from the last meeting around this, we had a very good discussion. And in it, one of the outcomes was that we would split the original proposal into 2 separate tracker items. One which described how you would represent sex assigned at birth in AU Core, and the other one which will have us decide whether or not to make it a must support element or not. So the original tracker item has been withdrawn and replaced with the new tracker items 44856 and 44857. I think because it's easier, we'll do the 44856 which is the addition of a profile to AU Core of the RSG extension to support representation of sex assigned at birth values. So before we look at that, I'll just check if there are any questions before I jump in. Seems not. So shall we go to the tracker then?
So it's just loading.
Sure. All right. So first thing to note, this is only for a Core patient. And what this is describing is how we would profile the recorded sex or gender, which is already profiled as part of AU base, specifically for representing sex assigned at birth values as part of AU Core. The way this would work is you would define the minimum expectations when representing sex assigned at birth, enabling a sex assigned at birth in AU Core patient to be must support element. Sorry, these are the things which this extension will support doing, and it will support conformance testing of must support of sex assigned at birth values if we opt to make this a must support element. So really this change requests amount to adding a profile, which we're calling AU Core RS3 sex assigned AB. You can see the URL. And all this profile will do is make the type and value must support and fix the type to be the SNOMED concept for sex assigned at birth. And we will bind the values for sex assigned at birth to the biological sex value set, which I think corresponds to a SNOMED CTAU reference set. And yeah, probably a good idea to have a look at what those values can be. So we have female, indeterminate sex, intersex, or male. So these are the things which presumably hospitals can record when they're recording your sex assigned at birth. So this is a very infrastructural type thing. It really only becomes very meaningful when you make sex assigned at birth must support to support conformance testing of that, but it also allows a standardized way to represent sex assigned at birth, regardless of whether it's must support or not. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions or to hear any comments.
So the result of this would be, if you did use this extension, sorry, if you were to claim conformance to this profile in AU Core, you would have to support both those key elements. You couldn't support just one of those key elements. But it's not part of this to say that you have to actually support this extension. It's just that
Correct.
if you do claim conformance to the extension, you will have to support both those things. Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
A further
Yes.
clarification to that. Because it's a profile of an extension, you don't claim conformance to that profile, similar to how we have an IHI profile of identifier. And we have the rules on patient to say we expect you to support IHIs. There's no claiming conformance on the wire to that. So this is a similar thing again, because it's an extension, the same kind of rules around data type profiles apply. Did you have any other questions about that, Richard? Did I make that clear?
No, nothing more. Thank you.
So essentially what we're falling into then, like as we say that we put must support on IHI in patient as a slice, if you will, of identifier. And then we have the behavioral rules around that for like requesters and responders. In this case, the same applies. We would be, if we chose to put must support on this sex assigned at birth, that's when that would come into play. At this point in time, the proposal is to include a profile that defines how you would exchange sex assigned at birth. And every time you do exchange sex assigned at birth, you have to have, it's essentially a code value pairing. That's all this does. The type says this is sex assigned at birth, and the value is what your sex assigned at birth is. And that every time you send that, you need to send both of these, and that both of those are must support under the AU Core definition. Now, I think we also have another hand up. Heath.
Got two.
Just a quick question on the value set, if I can go back to that. I struggle with some of these concepts, but is there a clear distinction between indeterminate sex and intersex? Because some of the reading
Yes.
I've done, and even I think there's one of the government value sets, they combine the two. I'm not sure whether it's Meteor or something. They actually have intersex or indeterminate as a single concept. So I'm just wondering whether we need to, I don't think it's going, for me, it's not going to adjust the how I vote, but I just wanted to get some clarity if that's clear, but the distinction between these two concepts.
I'm not going to respond in terms of how SNOMED regards these. I'll leave that to the SNOMED terminologists. But intersex means you have a known intersex condition, whereas indeterminate sex potentially just means you don't know what the sex is.
Okay, that's clear enough for me. Thank you.
And that matches with the SNOMED concepts. I think there was a workshop we did, might have even been about 3 years ago now, where we looked at these concepts. The agency and I think the HL7 Australia PA working group did. And this value set, I think, was what came out of that. And that was the definition of those two values.
I think Angus's hand's up as well.
Yes.
Hi, Ruben. Probably dumb questions, but I'm really struggling with the multiples of sex we're having now. So that this is an extension on recorded sex or gender, is it?
No, it is not.
No.
It is a profile, and no more than that, because so on the wire it looks like this, which just says what your sex assigned at birth is. It's a profile, to be clear, since recorded sex or gender could do administrative, it could do billing, it could be legal, that when we're trying to provide some clarity on how do you exchange sex assigned at birth, the profile is setting that clarity. That's what it's doing.
So it is the recorded sex at birth extension with specific type and value set.
Yes.
Right. So it's a recorded sex or gender with a particular type that makes it sex at birth.
Yes.
Yep.
That's right.
And then we're going to get this along with other types as well.
You may anyway.
You may.
That this change request isn't addressing that, though. I guess that's the next one to say that the next proposal is to support the sex assigned at birth flavour of recorded sex or gender. At this point, there are no, even when we put this profile in, there are no support requirements. These support requirements on these particular parts of the extension only kick in when you choose to use it.
Yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah. So yeah, I just reiterate what I said before. It's going to get really difficult once we go into multiple different sex types. And I know because today we have one sex type, and I know we can argue that you can argue what is that sex type. It's a mishmash of many things, but in a communication from doctor to pathology lab, there is only one sex sent to us, and therefore it's very clear that we use that sex to use reference ranges. The moment you bring in a second sex, that clarity just disappears, even if it's optional, even if it's like not much support. As soon as the doctor is providing us two types of sexes, it's going to be a very chaotic world in people understanding which one are we using. And I'm just very concerned about that.
I think we're in that world already, to be frank.
How are we in that world? I don't. So how do you see us in that world now?
It just may not be visible to you. Exactly. You getting one value, but that value could be coming from all kinds of different places.
Yeah.
Indeed, those values could be actually reflecting gender identity and not sex for clinical use.
I guess from our side, there's no ambiguity because people never send us but one. They only ever send us one sex. And I understand what your point is. The UIs in medical systems might be collecting multiple different and choose to put one in our message. And I accept even the users of those systems possibly aren't clear on which one is going in that message. But from standing on our side, we only get one. So if anyone questioned us, what did we do? We'd say, well, we did the only one that's in the message. It's, you know, and I'm just very nervous whether we go to the day we get two, where it's going to be very difficult for us.
Is to actually remove that ambiguity by actually having these multiple type different genders, so that we can effectively deprecate the existing one, because it isn't clear whether it is sex or gender. You might think it's not ambiguous at the moment, what you're receiving, but because of the rules that have changed in Medicare, where someone can actually change their sex to their gender identity, you will probably start to get those gender identities through as sex, which is actually not their sex at birth.
I think at the moment, Angus, you're sort of suggesting that your systems, whatever they get, they treat it as if it was sex assigned at birth. And so this gives you a way to say explicitly, if you send us it in a bucket called sex assigned at birth, we'll treat it the way we always have. If you send it in another bucket and don't tell us what it is, we'll still assume it's sex assigned at birth. And so now everybody knows that what you're treating it as.
Well, I'm worried.
Is that what's happening?
Close. I'm worried that, like today, you send us one and we use it. We don't make any assertions as to what it was. You sent us a one sex and that's what we use. And if
you don't make any assertions about it, but you do make an assumption about it. You assume it's relevant for their physiology.
No, we assume it's the sex you want us to apply reference ranges to. We don't.
Right. So you assume it is relevant for the test you were reporting against.
Yeah. And look, that's not really where the problem lies. The problem lies the day we get two, because even if you start sending us this one, and even though we may all agree that this is the one we should use, the day you send it to us, I can guarantee we're not using it because we've never seen one before. So you're going to start sending to us. It could take a year for us to change to use it. Then we have to flag to people we've now changed. Like I don't know the answers, but I'm really worried about the rollout strategy of how we move across. How do we, as an industry, signal to doctors we're now using, I guess we're going to have to send out communicators to say we're now going to use biological sex where it is provided to us and the old sex where it's not. And then that's ambiguous. Can't say the word. That's going to be difficult.
I think we're almost talking about the second proposal at this point.
I was just going to say.
Because this is not saying you actually, any system is expected to support this extension, this profile at this point. It's just a definitional right now. That's the proposal is, if we're choosing to do that, let's be clear about how we all know something is sex assigned at birth.
Agree. I'm not criticizing the structure or what we have here. So I agree. I'll wait till later.
Okay. And I think at this point, Heather, it's probably a really good time for you to come in. I see your hand up.
I was actually going back to Heath's conversation before about the value sets. Can we see those again? Whoever's showing the screen, please. I would model the value set the same way. I just would like some clarification here. In the open air modelling, indeterminate is something that the clinicians assert we cannot tell. We have looked, but we don't know. So that's actually a clinical assertion of indeterminate as opposed to unknown. And
yes,
we also have different ways of recording unknown, but that's not currently there. And I'm assuming that that's also done separately. So I just wanted to clarify, this is the clinical assertion. We looked, there was ambiguous genitalia, and we've sent off the labs or something to determine the genetic sex so we can properly assign it. So you'd see it as a temporary value, if you like, for a newborn until the assertion was made, are they female, male, or intersex? Is that?
Yes, that's right, Heather. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And unknown is managed elsewhere, yeah?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Okay, Angus, I still see your hand up. Is that
sorry.
just a holdover?
Yeah, it's a holdover.
All right, do we have any further comments? Because it seems like what we're more interested about is, do we make sex assigned at birth the concept must support, rather than the definitional, if we were to choose to exchange it, what would it look like? If there aren't any further comments on this, we can move to put this to a vote on defining the profile on how it works.
Can I just flag with the value set? I'm looking at the ABS standards now, and it does seem like they only use male, female, and another term. So just flagging that it doesn't align to the existing ABS standards. So I don't know if that's something we're concerned about.
I think that might have been the one that I was referring to when they combined the two concepts into one.
The ABS standards are about reporting. So one of the things is often they're not interested in stuff that's a very small part of the population. So the fact that their division is coarser grained than the clinical one that's available here doesn't seem to be a huge problem.
Thanks, Richard. Yes, that was intentional for the purpose of this, for a primarily clinical focus. And I see, Daniel, you have your hand up.
Yes, just following on from what Heather said. So how would unknown be represented? Because I've worked on a very large number of systems internationally, and it's normal to have an unknown option within that space. So could we get clarification on that?
Yes, so for the unknown, we would be expecting, if your unknown flavor is that you, and I'll just, use the word flavor there, that you do not have the data.
Correct.
Then
the situation when it's genuinely unknown, it might be something that has come into a lab, or all kinds of scenarios where you don't know, there's missing information. So
yeah, across the entire implementation guide for AU Core, we have a standard way of saying that across everything, and that's where that's handled. There's a specific data absent reason concept, and it's asking systems to put unknown where there is missing data.
So would there be an unknown option then added to this value set? Is my question.
It wouldn't be, it could be added to the value set, but it applies in any case. We have some conformance rules that require a system to handle missing data. Let me just go to where that is. I think that's under must support, which describes how a system is to exchange when information for a particular data element is missing, and this applies across the board. And it looks like that. For example, there are some complexities within that. Sorry.
You can make use of an extension to have an extra element which is in the data group carrying the value, which says there's nothing here to say, or it's unknown, or I couldn't ask, or any one of a similar set of things about being the unknown. So there's a standard pattern to put in an extra data element which says I don't have a good value for that element.
Yep.
Ruben,
and that can then be used for dates as well as for codes.
Yep.
Ruben, didn't you have a set of value sets where you were adding unknowns and all sorts of things? And what were they for?
The gender identity, I think.
Gender identity and individual pronouns.
Yep.
Hold those in AU base, yes.
So why wouldn't we do the same principle here to actually add the unknown to the actual value set so it's explicit?
We could indeed make a change request. I think it's because the value set exists. And we could indeed have an addition to the proposal to put the unknown or data absent reason flavors we've been applying across the board for individual pronouns and for gender identity.
I mean, this is extensive, so in principle we can use that anyway. So
yes, that's true.
now, but yeah, maybe we should be looking at that in the future.
Let's make that a follow-up change request just to confirm the exact values we want to put in, because there was some discussion about that, of the difference that we did between, I think, gender identity and pronouns.
Yep.
If we did a follow-up change sort of tracker item, Danielle, would that get into release 1 of AU Core?
Release 1, yes. The March ballot,
Okay.
no, because that gets published tomorrow, and it wouldn't anyway,
Yeah.
because of the release cycle of the terminology is like a minimum of 5 weeks. So
All right, sure.
even if we agreed it today, yeah. Okay, any further comments,
Right.
or are we happy to move to a vote on the proposal that I'll just bring up again in one of my windows? There'll be the JIRA here. Okay.
All
I'll
right.
ask if
I
someone
move.
is happy to motion. You are happy to? Okay, thanks, Ruben. Someone happy to second approving this proposal?
I'll second.
Thanks, just confirming that was Heath.
Correct.
Thank you. And I don't have any electronic vote prepared, so we're going to go a bit to old school with Zoom and ask people to put their hands up. First, I'd like to ask for people who want to vote to abstain to raise your hand, please, using Zoom. Someone's put a thumbs up, and I'll assume that is abstain. Okay, we're still getting those numbers in. Okay, that's stabilized at 22 have chosen to abstain. If you can put your hands down now. Thank you. Can you please raise your hands if you are going to vote negatively? Okay, we have no hands raised. All other participants then are taken as approval.
Some of the other participants are people's autopilots. So
Yes, we
will
take
muck up
that
the
into
numbers.
account when we adjust that later. Because I don't get to vote either as the chair. But it is a good point, Richard. We do need to remove the AIs and from that vote. Okay, so that motion has passed. Ruben, are you still able to stay on the line for the second
Yes,
one?
I am.
So now comes the much more complex one then, though, about do we make it must support in AU Core patient? I'll just open that JIRA.
Right. Am I talking?
Yes, please.
All right. So yeah, now comes the fun part. The proposal is to make sex assigned at birth a must support element. For me, this has been driven by two key drivers for this. First of all, it's an included element in AUCDI, and one which I believe clinicians feel very strongly must be supported. It's also included in the RACGP's standard around sex and gender values for collection. So there's clearly a clinical driver for this. But the other reason I'm trying to get this in is so that we can establish some sort of baseline of a sex value, which is not gender identity, which can be used in the absence of something like sex parameter for clinical use. And we know it's not perfect. We understand that. It's based on observations at birth. It's also a bit questionable as to what a valid source of this information will be, but nonetheless, it will set a baseline until we can do better in the future. So with that said, this is, I think everyone understands what must support means, but just to refresh your memory, it for systems that are creating AU Core patient instances, if they have sex assigned at birth as a value internally, then they need to include it. This is an optional parameter. It's not mandatory. So if they don't have the data, they don't have to do anything. There's no obligation. For receiving systems, they need to be very clear on how they support it. And that can be as simple as saying, my system will not crash if I receive an AU Core patient instance, which has this information included. It can be as simple as that. I think the real obligation here comes in for new IG developers which are seeking to adopt AU Core. They need to make room for the fact that sex assigned at birth must support an AU Core and therefore will be in their specifications as well. So the rest of this proposal is really just using the aforementioned mechanism to include sex assigned at birth in an AU Core patient instance. And you, as Danielle said, you would never assert that profile's URL, the one that you see ending in sex assigned AB. That's merely for testing the validation inside an instance itself. So you'd use the actual individual recorded sex or gender extension and populate it according to the rules of the profile. So yeah, happy to take any questions from there. That's the long and short of it, I guess. And Heath, I see your hand.
I think I've indicated my concern about the bus supports for servers when perhaps a system already is about to implement the concept in their user interface, but has a different development timeline for their API to support it. So I've mentioned that before, so I'll just put that out there. I won't go into it any further. It's actually the second part that you talked about, which is downstream profiles. So if a downstream profile has a different meaning of must support, whether this is legitimate or not, I'd be interested to get comments. But effectively, those profiles are inheriting that must support, even though their meaning of must support may be different for their profile. As we know, must support is not defined by FHIR. It is defined by the IG publishers or authors. So
I'll comment on that. In downstream IG, so there are two ways to implement AU Core. One is profile only, which does not put therefore obligations on servers or clients. That is what would affect downstream IGs. You're right that downstream implementation guide will inherit the fact that this element is must support, and therefore whatever its definition of must support is would need to take into account that sex assigned at birth is must support. That is, if we put it on a Core patient, that's what it would mean. And it is a significant implication.
Sorry, Heath. So the obligation elements that you're adding in adds a whole heap of complexity to the profile, but does that help us in this particular case?
It clarifies what Ruben was saying around clients and responders. There is no obligation that downstream IGs take on the capability statements of the client and server. There is an expected obligation around profile only support, but not around the client server obligations.
So the obligations that you're adding into the profiles now are things like must populate or must provide or whatever, and must not fail for clients.
Yes.
Does that actually help the downstream profiles or not really?
No, they can choose to adopt them. It depends on whether their system is choosing, or whether the downstream IG is choosing to also adopt the RESTful API conformance.
Can they override those?
They can go more specific.
Right.
Or they can choose not to use it, in which case, yes, they absolutely can. There is no obligation. The definition of must support for any interactions or system roles is picked up.
I'll stop there because the rest of the people probably don't understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, probably not. Richard, your hand is up.
So if I understood this correctly, a system could say, an existing system could say, oh, it's must support. You're sending me, when I get information like this, I will ignore it. Thus, I'm not crashing, and thus I'm meeting my must support obligations. And if somebody wanted to demand that they actually process the information, that would be part of an extra demand on them other than what they get from AU Core. Is that right?
Yes, it is, and that is true now.
Yep.
The
Yeah,
system may
So,
ignore it.
yeah, so that suggests to me that the concerns of Heath are sort of avoidable at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
I'm not convinced. Maybe
And I
for
think-
I didn't quite hear that.
Sorry, Ruben.
I didn't. Did you say something after Richard? Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that it soothes my concern. It may be okay for the client, but not necessarily for the server. It really comes down to the meaning of those downstream IGs. So, for example, the IGs that I've been involved in are basically saying we provide this value when it's marked as must support. So it is a definitive statement that says we do actually provide a value here if we've got one. And if we're inheriting from AU Core, then effectively it's inheriting the fact that they are providing that value.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the issue that I've got, and probably even from, if Sonic were to implement a client-side profile and their meaning of must support is similar, as in we accept this and we will do something meaningful with it, which is different to the meaning of must support in AU Core, then they've got a problem too.
Yes, agreed. And on that note, similarly, Andy, your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm concerned that using this as a proxy for sex for clinical use is going to create confusion. So my concern is if you get a gender of one sex and then you get another value in this, then what does that mean? And it's without having a sex for clinical use. If I saw sex at birth provided, what is my assumption about administrative sex or in the gender? I guess I feel for Angus's issue that now we've got potentially 3 different combinations that he could receive, and none of them are actually specifying the semantics of that clinical use. And so you'd have to overlay some interpretation that's just not clear what it is.
Yep. So I guess there's an inherent assumption there that systems like Angus's or yours, Andy, are exchanging data based purely on AU Core, and that's very unlikely. You'll most likely be sending and receiving data based on a use case specific FHIR implementation guide, which if it was based on AU Core, would certainly have additional requirements which address these particular concerns, I would think.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Thanks, Ruben. Andrew.
Yeah, I think one of the kind of broader questions for the group is how widely adopted is this data element in both your APIs and your systems? Looking at the vendor support page for patient, there is no, we added that after we added the sex assigned to birth after the consensus meeting 2 weeks ago. There has been no indication that people currently support this. in their systems for interoperability or even just collection. So I do think from the broader aspect of, is this currently supported and something that people have or vendors have in their systems, it may not be there currently, and as such should not be a must support in the current iteration of the AU Core. So the first release of AU Core should not have that as must support and give more time to the entire group to evaluate how exactly we want to use it and work towards adding that as a element. So avoiding adding these additional must support elements towards the end of our period here as we move to ballot for comment.
Thanks, Andrew.
So,
Angus, oh, sorry, Ruben.
oh yeah, I just added 2 responses to Andrew's comment there. We must remember that not every vendor in Australia knows about Sparked or indeed that page. I can absolutely tell you that virtually every jurisdictional health system with a maternity ward that's integrated with that state's births, deaths, and marriages system is capturing sex assigned at birth for interoperability. That's happening. The other thing is, just because we make it must support, acknowledges the fact that people may not be supporting this, and there's no impact on them until they are capturing it and wish to share it. So must support isn't exactly the same as we support it at the moment in our application.
The must support does say that you need to be able to demonstrate the capability to exchange it. So by making it must support, everyone who conforms to AU Core needs to demonstrate that capability as a server, at least.
From a conformance testing, yes, it implies some cost. But
you also, I mean, even if you cannot be doing anything with your level of must support as a receiving system. I assume that's what you mean by server. It can be as little or as much as you want it to be, just as long as you're clear on how you're supporting it. So yeah, I accept there's an impact there, but I think
the impact is that by making this must support, any server will need to collect and expose this for the FHIR resource to demonstrate conformance to the initial release of AU Core.
What do you mean by collect and expose?
In order to populate the sex assigned at birth in a meaningful way, in order to show conformance, there needs to be some way to enter that in your collect, etc., in your system database to expose that via the FHIR resources.
So I was not aware of that requirement. Sorry.
I will add a further comment to that. So that's conformance testing. If you have to prove that you are conformant, and the conformance requirements for servers, which might be on the summary on must support, shall be able to. So if you are going to, at this point in time, from a conformance testing perspective, that's where the cost comes in. But that could just come in your back end rather than your front end, but it's still there.
So Danielle, can I clarify on what Andrew said? Is it indeed the case that if you're trying to claim conformance to AU Core, even if your system doesn't intend in production to be capturing, collecting this information, that you need to do that in order to prove conformance?
You need to prove that your server, if you're a server, shall be able to populate it if your system had the data. Yes.
Okay, thanks. I've learned something.
Assuming we keep that definition. Yes.
Okay. So if your system doesn't have the data, you don't need to do anything with it. Sorry, you don't have to start collecting the data. But once you start collecting it, you have to be able to supply it. Is that
no? Once you start collecting, you have to send it. If you must prove through a formal conformance thing that you actually conform to this, you have to demonstrate the capability that if you ever do collect it, you are able to populate it.
Okay. Yep.
It's a capability-based definition.
Which was my original concern.
Yes.
That there is a potential difference between when someone might support it in the system. I think it's reflex and what they actually
Struggling to hear you, Heath.
Yeah, I think you're breaking up. We might move to Angus.
I was just on this point. I was going to say that the sender doesn't need to, a sender who does not collect it does not need to prove that they can send it. They just need to agree that if they were to collect it in the future, they must send it, isn't it?
If you have to demonstrate conformance to this, then you would have to demonstrate that you are able to populate it. So if your test data set, it's not through your UI, but you would have to be able to demonstrate if you're claiming conformance, and only if you're claiming conformance, to be an AU core server, not profile only. But if you say you're an AU core server, then if we put must support on this element, you would have to demonstrate the capability to send every must support element if it existed in your system.
That's how do you intend software developers to do that? You're saying software developers must implement the entire specification, even though
it's profile by profile.
How do I meaningfully do what you just said? If I've built a system, I have a system and I implement AU core, but I don't collect this must support item, so I don't need to output it. Fine. But then when I go to do conformance testing, you're saying I have to fudge somehow my system to now pretend it is collecting it and output it.
Yes. But not for every single for all the resources that you're declaring conformance to. That's what it means to put must support on, because the meaning of must support in AU core is minimum requirements, which I think it's really meaningful that we're having a discussion, given that definition, between saying how you could do it and putting a must support on it to say that you shall do it.
This seems madness to me. Like you're saying that as they go through conformance testing, they have to fudge sending it just to pass conformance, even though the system doesn't collect it. And then they pass conformance, and then in 2 years later, they do decide to implement it. How will that implementation have any relevance on the conformance test they passed at the beginning?
So to be fair, I don't think this will impact your system. I wouldn't expect that, depending on what you're offering, that you're playing an AU core server role. Multiple systems will most likely be doing profile only and have their own capability statement definitions for the use case on what does must support mean.
Yeah, I wasn't talking in the sense of like Sonic has this problem. I'm more just thinking I'm putting the hat on of I'm a genie, for instance, sending e-orders, right?
Yep.
So Genie today doesn't collect this element. They go to do conformance and they say you need to prove that you can send this element, and they go, but we don't collect that element, and they go, well, you just have to fudge it somehow. So what are they going to do?
Like, assuming they would be conforming to a capability statement for a requester defined in a different IG. There is no expectation that these client and server apply across all IGs. I don't think they do. The profile only support does.
I think we would be doing both.
I thought we would be defining things like service request in e-requesting, but then just saying, well, we're just going to use an AU core patient.
I think you will, but again, unless you're claiming conformance to an AU core client, in addition to your AU e-requesting requester capability statement, you don't have to pick up the obligations in the capability statement. You need to pick up the profile only requirements. But the architecture for e-requesting would be defined with its own capability statements that would say, what does must support mean? And they do not inherit an AU core client or AU core server.
So I think this is kind of complicated, and maybe what we need is a set of scenarios that describe the process so that everybody's clear as to what happens in those instances.
I agree. In fact, that's one of the topics for the face-to-face on March for the FHIR working group, to be clearer around what the downstream obligations are across the HL7AU standards. So I think that's great. And if anyone's coming to that, then come and participate in that conversation.
Okay,
So,
can I just
in the morning? Or
no,
is it
not in the morning.
clash? So it's going
That's
to
the
clash with
symposium.
core. No, I mean, like the after morning tea session when there's no AU core, will that topic be on?
We can schedule it that way. So coming down to, because we're having a slightly extended session for this one, and it seems like there's still a lot of discussion on must support here for this element. And I see, Daniel, you have your hand up. Did you want to make a comment at this time?
Yes, just very briefly, I'd like to say two things. First of all, I just want to underscore what Andy was saying earlier. I personally would highly prioritize the sex for clinical use over this issue to resolve, because I think that is of fundamental importance in an interoperability context. I think sometimes there might be a little bit of confusion in some of the things that Ruben is saying around modeling versus interoperability. But then that's probably an argument that we could take offline some other time. The second thing I wanted to say is I've worked quite significantly internationally in interoperability, and the ecosystem of health systems that will need to potentially support this in order to be validly able to sell their product within Australia is much higher than the number of EHRs, like 50, 100, 200 times as high. So every time you introduce a must support, be aware that it will limit the availability of useful pieces of software that need to come into Australia. Now, of course, there's things that will need to be done, but anything that goes into must support in the patient, the AU core patient, is going to be very significant in its impact long-term on the support for a relatively small startup that might have a brilliant product that we want to use in Australia. So I know that's a very general comment, but I think it's a perspective that's important to have when we're setting standards that will be used, hopefully, Australia-wide.
Thanks, Daniel. Any further comments on this? Okay, as chair, that means I get to say what I think at this point. I am in the camp that does not want this to be must support in R1. Very supportive of, and I advocate having the profile in AU core, but I don't think that sex assigned at birth as must support on an R1 AU core patient profile is what we should be aiming for yet.
Going to vote to try and progress this at least, or
I
is
think
there
we
too much
should.
ambiguity around what must support means that we can't?
I don't necessarily think there is. I mean, I think we can take a decision at this point. We'll ask if someone is happy to motion to accept the proposal. If that isn't, if we can't go through with a vote on that, we can also motion to defer this question.
Nope, I'm going to move that we accept it, and I will accept whatever the outcome is. And I want to make it clear that I'm doing this because there's very clear direction from the clinical design group that sex assigned at birth is important enough for R1 of AUCDI, and thus I have to believe it has clinical benefit. So I will state that and move that we accept this proposal.
Thanks, Ruben. Is someone happy to second that proposal? Either hands up or call out. Okay.
I have
No
a
worries.
question. Yeah,
Yes,
I
Richard?
have a question. I'm just wondering whether there are a significant group of people who want to know more about the ins and outs of must support before they move out of the abstain camp, because that might make a difference, but it might not. I was just wondering if there's a lot of people who want more information before they move out of abstain.
I think that's very valid and important, Richard. And I think it's something that we should look at trying to resolve or get to the bottom of, at least at the next face-to-face on the 20th. I think if we can't get to the bottom of that at that point, then we're really going to struggle with other things, and not just for AU Core, but also, I guess, for e-requesting as well.
I
agree with that. The question is, does that mean we stop making decisions? We've got some change requests to remove must support off other items. Do people feel more comfortable making removals rather than additions still?
I am.
I think we're stalled because I think the group really is struggling with must support. I think I am.
And it really does depend on what role your system is going to take. If you're doing profile only, that definition is...
See, even that term, Danielle, I don't know what that really means in reality, to be honest. So
could you then review the section called profile only support and put some content, and that's, I guess I'll put that in the chat then for everyone to have a look at that material and to provide some feedback then on which parts of that need to be clarified.
I liked Marvin's suggestion. Is it worth us prototyping just a fictional flow of maybe this element being added to core, what that would mean maybe through e-requesting, you know, like, so what does that now mean for Genie sending an e-order? What does that mean for Sonic receiving an order where this must support? Like, I think the clarity's not there. I can see that it can be, you know, we need to talk about, okay, the e-requesting profile could constrain it further, but I think we kind of need a run through. What does it mean for the sender? What does it mean for the receiver, with some context about, you know, let's pretend we're going to make this must support. What does it mean?
I think that's really good. And we would want the e-requesting team to come to that, to define what they're thinking of must supports, because that's where that comes into. The fact that we put it on an AU Core profile means it's picked up by the downstream IG, but it doesn't say what you have to do with it. You can ignore it. You can display it. You can persist it. You can have to do something in particular.
Can we knock it out? Can we say, no, that's just not going to happen in e-requesting?
No.
Yeah, so the minimum is we have to take what we inherit.
Yes.
And then, of course, we can further that and say it's mandatory or something. But I'd like to even just start with the minimum scenario. So what if, you know, even if e-requesting now just inherited that up and didn't think too hard and let that flow through, what would that mean for the receivers and senders? And because then I think we can start making decisions about, oh, that's what it means. And now e-requesting can make decisions about, oh, well, we're going to have to do this then. And I think that will help people back down to core, what it actually means downstream to have that as must support.
Even just dry running this profile only versus compliance to server. I think that we need to think about that as well. We need to
excuse me,
stimulate.
I'm new here, but I just a bit concerned about the due process that we're going through here, because we've reopened a discussion and are making decisions after the discussion was closed. Is this good practice? Because there might be other things that are equally important to what's being discussed that need to be addressed.
I didn't hear a second, so I think that the motion has not passed or has not gotten through
it's not,
to the next
not
step.
getting through.
So I think we've perhaps missed that due process, but I think we're moving on from that to try and work out how we get clarity.
It
What we're
seemed
having a
obvious to
discussion
me.
about, sorry, is
I support the
why
process.
didn't
It
it
just wasn't
pass?
clear that we were moving on.
Well, I think we're actually, and that, yep, I'm happy to take that feedback. I was thinking that we were having the discussion on why there was no seconder and what are our next steps to make any decisions. And I think that's the conversation we're in now.
I agree.
Yep. Danielle, if I may,
Yes.
I totally accept all the discussion we've had on must support and the steps we're taking with respect to that. I also just wanted to come back to Angus, Andy, and Daniel's concern around sex specifically for clinical use. I'd be interested to know, with a quick show of hands, would be more supportive of a data element that was reliably for sex for clinical use versus sex assigned at birth. If that's something that they would be more in favor of supporting rather than sex assigned at birth. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, again, it comes down to a decision. In my industry, we need a very clear what are reference ranges intended to be against in the future. Is that sex for clinical use? Is that sex at birth? It could be either. If you gave me both, I'd be really doubtful which one. So sex for clinical use kind of sounds right, but not if you also then give me sex at birth. Now I'm like, I don't know. So as an industry, maybe we need to make a decision that this is the order of things, you know.
So to me, sex for clinical use sounds like this is what you should be using now. Sex for assigned at birth is something that was the case some time ago, but may not be current now. So therefore, it's not the thing that you typically would use. That's my interpretation.
Yeah, I can also see a cascade. Like I think my understanding is sex for clinical use is a bit more per instance of something. You know, for this request, and so I can see almost a cascade. Like if we get sex for clinical use, we will use that for reference ranges. If we don't, and we get sex at birth, we will use that for clinical ranges. If we don't get that, we'll go back down to gender, which is what we do today, or the one we get today. But that's just me speaking, right? Like the problem I see is how do we disseminate that system? When does it start, that system? Like, does every lab have to put a communique out as soon as this goes live to say, we can't do it yet? Like you're using, you know, this one. And what does that even mean to a doctor when we say this one? And so I really worry about rollout and clarity as an industry as to what are we going to do? Like that cascading rule I just said almost has to be written in stone from a maybe RCPA perspective to say this is what we'll do. And then that still doesn't solve the problem of when do we do it? When did Sonic implement that we're now doing that, or Helios, you know, and how do we communicate that to our customers to say, today, as of the midnight, we're going to start doing this cascading logic or not? And and will doctors even understand the cascading logic? You know, will they take notice?
The problem I've heard recently around the sex for clinical use was that it wasn't going to be per request or per clinical interaction, that they were going to attach it to the patient. And I can't remember what forum that was, but whether it's AUCDI or whatever. But
it's the HL7 Europe pathology report IG.
That's where it was. Yeah. Okay.
That's where it was.
And I think that blurs things even more. It may make it simpler, but there's obviously not cut and dry solution to this.
And that's all waiting for us once we get past clarity on must support.
Okay. So in terms of this meeting, I can see lots of really interesting comments in the chat. So we're going to, I think at this point, defer any conversation about the sex assigned at birth element making must support. We will, looking at the rest of the agenda, we do want to move past those open change requests anyway. We will take the action to prioritize clarification of what the existing requirements are / changing those. These are up for discussion. They aren't set in stone about what does it mean that a client or a server has to act with. We may indeed remove the shall be able to, and that therefore does indeed take out what is mostly, I think, the confusion of but I never use that element. And that's, we can get to what does it say now, and which bits do we agree as a technical design group need to be removed, need to be added, need to be amended. And we'll prioritize that. I see, Ruben, I think you've put your hand down. I think I addressed, that's where we're going.
Well, I actually just wanted to know, Danielle, if we needed to communicate back to the CDG that it's not going into R1 pending, sorry, not going into the ballot in case there are questions when the ballot of AU Core for comment goes out as to why it's not must support.
It is going into the ballot as a defined profile, as in if you choose to do it, here's how you do it. You are not obligated, if you are a client or a server, to deal with it. You may choose to. So it is still in AU Core. Personally, I think that satisfies the AU CDI requirement, which is clear that it does not require every system to always implement every element.
Can I ask Heather if you're in agreement with that? Okay, see the thumbs up. Great.
Thumbs up, I'm good. We're not expecting the FHIR IGs to be one in sync, right? We're looking at the AU CDI roadmap. It's something that we do think is critical, but we need to bring the technical world along with us, and so it's something that we can be working towards as a roadmap, and that's fine.
All right. So what we're going to do then is move past the change requests, which were up for discussion, adding additional parts of what must support is, assuming we reach clarity that to HumanName. So at the moment, we'll be going to ballot for comment with must support only on patient named use and no other attribute. And we'll move past removal of those, which we also tabled for now, to our next items, which I think we really just want to talk about our next meeting. So what we were going to do tomorrow is talk about AU Core Connectathon planning and potentially deal with any of the juror requests we don't have today. I think we should discuss further on how we're going to define and elaborate must support and reach clarity on that. I think that should be our topic for discussion tomorrow, as well as Connectathon planning. Are there any other items that people think are important that we discuss on the 8th of March? And I'll just put the reason I'm asking this is because that, like, whatever we discuss is what's going in the ballot for comment. That's our last opportunity to make any changes to the current consensus draft. Just checking out 10. Okay, so that's what we'll focus on tomorrow. And then we also have our 15th of March session coming into the Connectathon, which was looking at Connectathon planning and how does that connect. On our face-to-face, we were planning to look at where we still have yet to agree on what the mappings between the AU CDI data classes are and the AU Core resource profiles, where, for example, we had AU CDI medication use statement, and there's ongoing discussion about medication statement or medication request. And we have a similar ongoing discussion around medical history and procedure completed event as to whether that is the procedure resource or the condition resource. We may look at adjusting that depending on what we talk about tomorrow into further elaborating with must support. And I'll also liaise with the FHIR work group around some clarity around moving forwards on the obligations across the ecosystem and which specifications will need to be inheriting different aspects, and see if we can also achieve that clarity out of the FHIR working group on the 20th of March, which will help us. And then we've got another meeting on the 4th of April. We don't know what that's about yet. We're playing it by ear to see what we get through. I did want to raise for everyone coming into the face-to-face where we were going to look at medications and also medical history. To prepare for that, we're asking people to fill out the draft vendor support page, and I've linked that there. I don't think there's one for procedure yet. We'll add one. And also to review and submit feedback through JIRA on the profiles that we're going to be looking at. Do they support, are they appropriate for the AU CDI elements? And there are the mappings that we already have, along with where we don't have clarity, are in the AU Core AG, and that's the link there. And by this stage also, ballot will be open and people can provide ballot feedback and vote if you have signed up, which I think I've got some slides somewhere about that. And I think Brett can talk about that. I know there's some questions going on. The ballot for comment requires you to be either an individual HL7AU member or for your organisation to be a HL7AU member. That's the QR code for signing up. And there was a recent information session from HL7AU on how to submit ballot feedback. That link is there. It's also in the recording space from HL7AU. We'll send that link round. Just want to drop back because I'm really conscious of time here. To quickly, I want to note here on the Connectathon. So the registration is open. Lots of the spaces are closing really fast. Despite the fact, I want to draw people's attention to this, that the Connectathon event, if you go to it, will say sold out. There are some available spots. And so if you email events@hl7.com.au with the sessions you want to go on for the waitlist for, we've got some of those tickets already available for the waitlist for that session. Okay, so that's the end of the things that I wanted to remind people about in this session. Any comments or questions that people want to raise before we close?
How's progress going on remoting into the face-to-face?
I don't know. We've checked with the room facilities and that's not feasible. We could do a one-way where you could see us, but we could not in any way hear or see you, apparently, and that was prohibitively expensive. So I think at this point, we need to find people who can bring in a Polycon device if we want to be able to open that to hybrid and deal with it ourselves. Is there anyone coming who has one and wants to bring one? If you are, get in contact with me, send me an email, and we can talk about that.
I think Stephen Chu used to have one, but I'm not sure if he's coming.
He is coming. He'll be doing that for the firework group.
Yes, I am coming.
So we need to find a separate one. Sorry?
Have we confirmed the location?
Yes, we have. The locations are on the Connectathon page. Another one, obviously, we'd go to the Sydney one. Here on this Connectathon page, you will see the locations, including the room numbers.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other questions about the Connectathon or ballot? All right, we might hold that there, folks. I'll follow up with the co-chairs across the AU core group and the AU requesting group, and also get in touch with the wider TDG groups on how we can get some further clarity around must support. All right, thanks everyone. I'll stop the recording.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Danielle.
Thank you.